America's top-selling beer? Take a guess. It's no longer American.
The biggest challenge that we saw in the quarter was that we raised additional price in October. And as you know, when you raise price, you have a short-term hit to your volumetrics.
Americans love Mexican beer. In fact, over the past few years, Mexican beers have been one of the few bright spots in an otherwise struggling beer market. Even American craft brewers have jumped on the Mexican trend. Though making a truly Mexican beer in America is impossible thanks to geography, lots of brewers have been producing Mexican-style products. But those south of the border beers are clearly popular. You may not have realized they were this popular. According to the Beer Institute, in 2017, just over 2/3 of all beer imported into the United States came from Mexico. In this video, we look at which factors created such a market for Mexican beers in America. What made Americans depend on Mexicans for beer? Overall, imported beers only make up about 1/6 of America's beer market. So it's not like Mexican beers are taking over the American market entirely. Still, that means that Mexico produces roughly 1 out of every 9 beers consumed in the United States, which is quite impressive. In comparison, the next top countries are a drop in the bucket. The Netherlands, home to Heineken, which is now the world's second largest brewer, sent nearly 145 million gallons to the US, compared to Mexico's 712 million. Belgium, with roughly 58 million gallons imported, was followed by Canada, 44 million, Germany, 34 million, and Ireland, 32 million. From there, the numbers significantly drop off. The United Kingdom, at number 7, only sent 7.6 million gallons across the pond. One important caveat to keep in mind is that not all imported beers are actually produced abroad. Some reasonably strong performing foreign brands are actually made right here in the United States, including Beck's, Foster's, and Kirin. Still, a list of America's best-selling non-American brands shows that even those big names wouldn't help tip the scales away from Mexico's domination. In 2022, of the top 10 best-selling imported beers, 6 were Mexican, including Corona at number 1 and Modelo Especial at number 3. Keep the limes coming. After the Great Recession, the Dutch held a firm hold on the world beer industry thanks to Heineken, the leading Dutch beer brand. But within a decade, Mexico, a new world upstart, would smash the Netherlands, and in fact, the entire hoppy heartland of Europe. According to Trade Data Monitor, a Geneva-based source of trade information, Mexico exports more beer than any other nation at present and alone represents 30% of the global export beer market. Mexico is far ahead of the Netherlands at 14%, Belgium 13%, and even Germany 9%, the country that invented Oktoberfest. How in the world did Mexico pull this off? We would eventually arrive at an antitrust success story from the Obama administration thanks to a trail of alcohol-related hints. However, it began with market share, as these things frequently do. With nearly 2 out of every 5 cross-border beer dollars, the United States is the largest beer importer in the world. The majority of that money, around 80%, goes to Mexico. The early 1990s saw a meager 17%, so this is an improvement. The only market that matters for Mexico now is the United States. 97% of Mexican beer exports in a recent 12-month period went north of the border. The Netherlands, Ireland, Canada, Germany, and Belgium are America's second largest sources of suds behind Mexico. Belgium was third until recently, but Belgian exports to the United States vanished in 2021 when Stella Artois' current owners, AB Inbev, began making the ubiquitous Flemish Pilsner in breweries across the country. Even in a highly consolidated business, AB Inbev stands out as a border and brand crossing behemoth. Based in Belgium, it operates in nearly 50 countries, owns over 500 brands, and distributes roughly 1 in every 4 beers worldwide. And it's just one arm of 3G Capital, a Brazilian-led behemoth that owns everything from Burger King to Popeyes to Kraft and Heinz. 3G now owns less than a fifth of publicly traded AB Inbev and is involved in a variety of high-volume consumer businesses. But like with many great moves, its big moves began with beer. Jorge Paulo Lemann, the leader of 3G and a Brazilian native, comes across as a former top-tier tennis player who apparently abstains from alcohol. But according to The Beer Monopoly, our guide to much of this history, he observed breweries owned by a few of the wealthiest men in Latin America, and concluded that they couldn't all be brilliant businessmen. it seems to be much more likely that brewing was just a way to make money. He quickly purchased a piece of that money machine and kicked it into high gear, acquiring large Brazilian and Argentine breweries before assaulting the old world. He acquired Stella maker Interbrew in 2004 and merged it with Ambev to form Inbev. He was back on the move 4 years later, seeking a hostile acquisition of Missouri's Anheuser-Busch, the king of brewers. The massive company that is now known as AB Inbev was officially the largest brewer in the world, employing its strategy of firing employees, cutting expenses, and boosting profits across the board. But LeMan and his pals weren't content. Grupo Modelo, which at the time sold the majority of the beer in Mexico, belonged to them in part. Constellation Brands of New York has been selling Corona and other beers in the United States in collaboration with Modelo for years. The American company that was smaller took the chance. The $4.75 billion transaction to acquire complete control of Grupo Modelo's U.S. operations was hailed by then CEO Robert Sands as truly transformational and a significant milestone in our history and participation in the beer business. The metamorphosis has been as quick as it's been dramatic. Grupo Modelo beers have nearly conquered America in a decade under Constellation, which had no motive to skirt around Bud Light's marketing share, unlike AB Inbev. Constellation was ambitious in expanding its promotion beyond the typical Mexican-American customer base, recruiting celebrities such as Snoop Dogg, Bad Bunny, and Andy Samberg to sit on a beach selling Corona. Modelo Especial, which advertises its fighting spirit, quickly surpassed competitor after competitor to become America's #2 beer by dollar volume. According to beer journalist Kate Bernot, who has written about these themes for Sightlines and contributed articles on craft beer and something called canned hard coffee to the Washington Post, Constellation is quite adept at selling Mexican imports. When Americans started putting lime wedges in Corona long necks, these beers started to be associated with vacations, leisure, and a little bit more attitude than the typical American lagers that had previously prevailed. The fact that Constellation is associated with Ray's Beer Division, the largest beer supplier in the nation, also helps, according to Bernard. In California, which is not just the nation's largest beer market, but also a stronghold for Mexican imports, Ray's has an unusually powerful sales network. Since Mexican beer accounts for nearly 80% of Constellation's revenue, discussions of wine and spirits are now relegated to afterthoughts on earnings calls. According to executives, Constellation is rapidly increasing its market share across the nation, and Modelo Especial has surpassed Coors Light, Miller Lite, Bud Light, and Budweiser in size in its home state of California. Does Mexican beer boost on-trade sales in the U.S.? Imported beer is propelling the total beer category's volume growth in the United States on-premise. Beer imported from other markets accounts for more than half of total beer category growth, 52%, compared to other beer types. Consumers respect the provenance of imported beer, with Mexican beer being the main growth driver. The country is responsible for 79% of growth, followed by Irish, 10%, Italian, 2%, Japanese, 2%, Dutch, 1%, and all other countries combined, 5%. Mexican beer grew fastest in states closest to the Canadian border, while it grew slowly in those closer to Mexico. Most notably, volume share and performance peaked in Washington, plus 22.9%, New York, plus 22.1%, and Oregon, plus 20.7%. Mid-country U.S. states also saw a healthy performance. However, states closest to the Mexican border, including Arizona, plus 5.6%, and Texas, plus 6.1%, underperformed. Beer is not the only Mexican product to rule the roost. It was a knockout year for tequila as exports jumped to record-breaking highs in 2022. Mexican tequila continues to remain popular, with exports totaling $3.6 billion, or 3.4 billion euros, between January and October of last year. This is a 34.1% increase over the same period in 2021, according to economic data from the Ministry of Economy and the Agricultural Markets Consulting Group, or GCMA. Exports were just $849 million, or 806 million euros, in 2012, showing rapid market expansion for the fashionable distilled beverage. Are you a fan of Mexican beer? What do you think about all this? Comment below with your opinions about the company. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.